Anybody here a millionaire? Not yet. So, I like that. Not yet. Anybody here a ruler of a foreign country? No? Well, there's a story in the Bible about a rich young ruler. And that's what we're going to concentrate on today. So, in the 3.5 years of Jesus's earthly ministry, he probably held thousands of conversations and counseled perhaps many hundreds of people. The Gospels record only a portion of those exchanges, showing that those conversations were chosen for inclusion in the Bible are of particular importance to us, and we should pay close attention to the lessons there for us. One such conversation is found in Matthew chapter 19, verses 16 through 22. I usually like reading the King James, but today I'm just going to read what I have here, probably some verses from a different Bible I was reading at the time. Matthew 19, verse 16 through 22. Now behold, one came and said to him, Good teacher, what good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life? So Jesus said to him, Why do you call me good? No one is good but one, that is God. But if you want to enter into life, keep the commandments. He said to him, this young ruler said to him, Which ones? And Jesus replied back to him, You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. And honor your father and your mother. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The young man said to him, All these things I have kept from my youth. What do I still lack? And Jesus said to him, If you want to be complete, go, sell what you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come, follow me. But when the young man heard that saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. So what can we learn from this brief conversation? We see a very polite, respectful, and eager young man who leaves Jesus and goes away sorrowful. Why? The story makes it clear that he's young, and in Luke, he tells us that he is a ruler. That's Luke 18, verse 18, possibly a prince. In the parallel account in Mark, we are told that the young man came running up to Christ and knelt before him, and that's in Mark chapter 10 and verse 17. Showing a sense of urgency and respect, the young ruler shows submissiveness and a willingness to be taught when he addresses Jesus as good teacher. This was not a typical form of address for the Jews at this time. A more respectful greeting may not be found in the entire Bible. This young man came not to tempt Jesus, but to learn from him. We know that he was not a Sadducee because it's clear that he believed in eternal life and wanted to attain it, an unusual goal in someone of his position and age. A young man of wealth, or men of wealth, will often trust their riches and not be interested in what God has to offer. The young do not often look beyond today. Nothing's going to happen to me. I'm immortal. Nothing's going to bother me. Much less to the far reaches of eternity and eternal life. This rich young ruler was a very sensible young man. He knew something must be done to reach and attain this happiness. Eternal life is not a game of chance or blind faith. Romans chapter 2, I'm not going to turn there, verses 6 and 7 tells us that we are rewarded for our works, good or bad, and that eternal life goes to those who by patient continuance in doing good seek for glory, honor, and immortality. Jesus' response to all of this is interesting. He establishes that none are truly good except God, and to him goes all the glory. Then Jesus tells him to keep the commandments, specifically listing the last 6 of the 10 commandments, and the ones dealing with human to human, our neighbors and family relationships. The Jews of the time were well versed in the mechanics of the first 4 commandments in terms of the letter of the law. So Jesus lists the ones in which they were the weakest. It seems so simple, right? In order to have eternal life, keep the commandments. How do today's professing Christians who claim the law has been done away with get around this simple instruction? Other verses, such as John chapter 14 and verse 15, part of the verse says, if you love me, keep my commandments. It reinforces this straightforward directive. Pretty simple to understand. And then in John 15 and chapter 15 and verse 10, it says, if you keep my commandments, you shall abide in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. The young ruler tells Jesus that he has kept the commandments since he was a child. So Jesus must have known this man, probably like he knew the Samaritan woman at the well. What else should he do? Jesus does not contradict him. In Mark's account, it says, Jesus looked at him, and that's in Mark chapter 10 and verse 21. Jesus looked at him and loved him. Possibly this man was good at keeping the letter of the law, but he was coming up short in abiding by the spirit of the law. Maybe Jesus saw that he was absolutely sincere in his efforts to abide by those commandments. Whatever the case, Jesus does not attempt to sermonize on this point. The way the young man phrased the question, what do I still lack, seems a little bit of pride and self-righteousness. In effect, he says, I'm keeping the commandments and have done well in that regard all my life. Show me where I'm coming up short. Why do I feel this way? What should I do? Unlike what many of us would do, Jesus avoids starting a heavy conversation and disputing about what the young man said, but gets right to the bottom line. The young man's love of the world, his possessions. Jesus tells him to sell those possessions, give the money away, and follow him as a disciple. Yet the young ruler was unwilling to do this. His treasure was here on earth. His money, his power, his authority exerted a stronger tug on his heart than Jesus did. Matthew Henry says in his commentary, when we embrace Jesus, we must let go of the world, for we cannot serve God and money. To the young man's credit, he was not hypocritical. He did not pretend he could do this when he could not. He knew what this meant. Jesus' spiritual standards and his own ambitions and desires were just incompatible. Being both thoughtful and well-intended and keeping the commandments his whole life, he went away sorrowful, mournful, weeping with a broken heart. What he did, possessed and owned, that had such a hold on him as to make him willing to walk away from eternal life. What was holding him back? What did he really trust in? There is nothing spiritually wrong with wealth itself. The Bible's full of examples of godly men who were very wealthy. For instance, great men like Abraham, Job, David, and Solomon. The problem is the love of money. Because we live in a consumer-driven society, the love of money can hold us back too. In 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 10, Paul writes, Demas has forsaken me, having loved this present world. What caused Demas to leave Paul and Christ? Well, Demas loved the world. The particulars were not told to us. Whatever it was is of less importance than the simple spiritual fact that a camel cannot go through the eye of a needle. Someone who loves the world, whether rich or poor, will not be in God's kingdom. Someone who loves the world. So if you would, you can turn to James chapter 4 and verse 4. And let's see how quick I can get there. 4:4. I'm just going to read the last sentence there. It says, whatever, therefore, will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God. You love the world, you're an enemy of God. And in 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 and 16, 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 and 16, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof. But he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. So in conclusion, the point is that we do not achieve salvation through our efforts. It is from God alone and by his grace. With men, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible, and Jesus assures us of that. We have our part to play, and we are rewarded for our efforts, as Romans 2 explains. But when God takes us from this world, works with us, blesses us, and brings us into his family, we are truly blessed forever, which is truly a miracle.